right, we are now officially recording. Okay. Well, welcome. Thanks for joining us. I'm Liz Hill. I'm the Associate Director here for the Ombuds Office at the University of Colorado Boulder. And this is my second installment of our Fall Lunch and Learn series, The Gossip Train. So some of you might know the University of Colorado Ombuds from Boulder, Denver, and Anschutz. We've been publishing a series of blog posts all about gossip on our blog called Ombuzz, O-M-B-U-Z-Z. If you aren't familiar with it, please go ahead and check it out and subscribe at ombuzz.blog. And I'll put that link in the chat as soon as we get going here. Okay, and yes, I'm seeing, yes. Scott, thanks, Mark, for clarifying. So for those of you who are, I'll get to the logistics in a moment, but you are muted and your video is turned off until we get to the Q&A. So hang in there. Okay, so today's discussion focuses on the good and bad of gossip. And I'm joined by two of my friends and colleagues, Caroline Adams, who is the Ombuds at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and Mark Patterson, who's the Ombuds at the California State University, Channel Islands. Caroline and Mark have graciously agreed to join me here today and share some of their thoughts and insights about gossip. Caroline, Mark, anything you want to add before I move on?
Just want to say very happy to be here, very happy to meet some new colleagues and friends over at Boulder and from other places around the country. And I think this is a really important topic. It comes up a lot in our work as ombuds and has some serious ramifications.
Yeah, thanks, Liz, for inviting me and Caroline both to join in and to share in this kind of broad community discussion.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being here. It's my pleasure to have you. All right, so Scott, hopefully this will answer your and others' questions. A little housekeeping. Yes, you are muted and your video is turned off, and this is really to reduce distractions for the recording. We may use polls and ask questions throughout the presentation. So if you haven't already, go ahead and open up that chat box now. This is what we're going to use if we ask questions and ask you to respond, or if there's questions that you have. And we may reserve questions until the end. We'll kind of play it by ear. Do you see the recording button? Because I'm not even seeing it right now. Does anyone see it? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, thanks. And of course, you know, because the chat box function does use your name when you chat everyone, if you have a specific situation or something you want to ask or discuss and you're not comfortable, please feel free to reach out to the Ombuds office and we'll be happy to schedule a separate consultation with you. We aim to keep these programs, if you've been here before, you know, at 30 minutes. And this is really to give you a small bite-sized amount of information so you can get back to your day. We are recording to reach as many people as possible. And later today, I will send a follow-up email as always with any links to references as well as additional information and upcoming events. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. This is our roadmap for today. Some of you I noticed in the registration did attend the September Lunch and Learn, so thanks for that. And others did not, and that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and I'll quickly recap the September topic, which was what is gossip and why do we do it? And then we'll spend the rest of our time together discussing the dark side of gossip and its hidden virtues, as well as think through a scenario. And I'll keep an eye out for questions, like I said, along the way. And depending on time, we'll address them in a moment, or we may table them until we get to the allotted time for questions at the end. All right, so quick recap. For those who can't see the slides, I'll go ahead and read the quote that's on there. Gossip is what no one claims to like, but everybody enjoys. And I think that will resonate with most of us. And during our September Lunch and Learn, we talked about, as I said, the what and the why of gossip. And while scholars and researchers, they haven't exactly landed on a scientific definition of gossip, most of them do agree that it's a pretty complex topic. And some of the common characteristics are that it usually involves the informal, evaluative communication, which can be verbal, written, or even body language, about individuals, issues, or groups that's between two or more people. Gossip is really at the core of our society and our human relationships, and it's a social tool that we use to understand the world around us. Gossip and the consequences of gossip can all be judged as either good, neutral, bad, maybe even toxic. And they can range from valuable, informal chit-chat to malicious slander. In humans, we gossip, as we talked about in September, for many reasons. It helps us foster connection. It helps us wield power or social status. We can use it to kind of test and establish our social norms. We can use it to funnel information and knowledge. We use it to help us navigate, as I've mentioned, the world around us, to test ideas. And of course, as many of you may be familiar, to fill in the gaps when we don't have all the information and we need a complete story. People also use it, unfortunately, to retaliate when they feel resentful, or it could be a cathartic process. It releases emotions. It can be a way to gain support and reassurance. And lastly, I'll just say it can be a form of entertainment. Many find pleasure. They find it a pleasurable activity that distracts them from their daily mundane. So those are some of the reasons why we do it. All right, let's take a quick poll. I'll go ahead here and launch this. The poll, and I'll read it out loud again for those who might not be able to see it. When you think of gossip, which statement most accurately reflects your opinion? Gossip is good. Gossip is bad. Gossip is neutral. And Mark and Caroline, I'm going to ask you to kind of help me navigate this and chime in a bit as we see these responses come in. And as you're doing it, oh, go ahead, Caroline, go ahead.
I was going to say, definitely most people are leaning towards bad at this point.
Yeah, I see that. All right. And I'll just say as a couple more. Okay, looks like everyone participated. Great. Let's share the results there. All right, what do we have?
Looks like bad. Yeah, 2/3 of folks answered bad is how you describe gossip, but a significant portion said neutral. Nobody said good.
Nobody said good. Yeah. So interesting. No, but so thank you for doing it. There's no right or wrong answer, right? This is your opinion, and it's telling, right? It's telling of how we perceive gossip. And I'll just close this part with, our hope is that after today, after we talk through some of the good and the bad, that those of you who tend to see it bad, maybe you'll discover some hidden virtues you hadn't considered. And those who considered it good, well, none of you did, might be more cognizant of the darker side, right? So really to kind of think about what are we missing? What are we not considering when we think about gossip? So thanks for doing that. And yeah, just to reiterate, for those who can't see the results, 67 said bad, 33% said neutral. I'll go ahead and stop sharing that. All right. Moving right along. So again, I'll read this quote. Toxic gossip refers to collusive, dysfunctional processes which are detrimental to the healthy social and organizational relationships. It has an emotional undertow of anger, frustration, resentment, and hatred. And this is a quote by Catherine Waddington. And Catherine has actually written 2 books on gossip in organizations and really dives deep. They're not thin, they're pretty thick. Dives deep into the good, bad, and the neutral of gossip. And, I'll just talk a little bit about here, and then we'll get some input from you and from Caroline and Mark about what you see, in the workplace as far as negative gossip. But I'll just share, while celebrity gossip, can often be seen as interesting and entertaining, and it sounds like probably most of you agree, gossip in the workplace often gets a bad rap. And it's generally considered to be, taboo, something to ignore, to avoid, because it can be dangerous and harmful. And the reason for that is mainly because workplace gossip does often take a critical form. And it can be used as a weapon, to advance someone's own self-interest at the expense of someone else or others. And one reason gossip in the workplace gets a bad rap, is because it's difficult to regulate and control. It can be seen as interference or noise, or perhaps it's seen as challenging power or undermining authority, goals, actions. So we typically see this accomplished by the spreading of, as we heard in our Adele song coming in, malicious rumors, and people spread rumors to elevate their status, to alienate others. It can be a form of bullying. It can harm people's reputations, through shame or slander or sharing humiliating stories, just for someone's comic relief. And so these efforts would be considered negative, bad, or even toxic. So I'm going to stop there. We'd love to hear from you. Caroline and Mark, I'd love for you to share out and comment too. But as you're doing that, chime in, people in the audience, use your chat box. What kinds of examples of this negative gossip do you see in the workplace?
Yeah, I think another thing that Liz, maybe see, Scott says he hasn't heard anything good about gossip so far. We're not here. Just hold on, Scott. We'll get there. The effect on teams, we're in a workplace to collaborate, to work together. And if you have things that are, either open resentments about people or criticisms about people or hidden agendas, people talking about behind people's back and they might not even be aware of it. It can be really disruptive to team productivity and, people feeling comfortable and safe at the office.
Definitely. All true. Mark, any thoughts? And also people in the audience, chime in. Go ahead. What kinds of things do you see? Mark, any thoughts?
I'll throw in, Liz, it's when we think of gossip, we tend to think of the black and white, like somebody saying, I can't believe Liz, such a drunk. I mean, that's, just the most outrageous things. We think of that with gossip, but when it gets toxic, when it gets difficult is when it's kind of gray area. Like I had a situation trying to keep it very general of an organization where there was a departmental meeting and something was said kind of vaguely that was reported to somebody who wasn't at the meeting, and it generated a huge amount of conflict and stress in this department. And it wasn't the kind of thing that somebody, said whispering behind their back. It was just a kind of a badly phrased, could be read a certain way statement that is still to this day causing ripples and difficulties in this organization. So I think it's easy when we're talking about the spectrum between dark and good to forget that there's a lot of things in between. And I kind of seen that happen sometimes.
That's a great observation. And Daniela, yeah, and thank you, Caroline. Hold that thought, Daniela. But Daniela starts to kind of tap into that. Daniela says toxic gossip is different from what she defines as gossip, which can also be an important pressure and tension release, the powerless being able to express themselves in some way. So Danielle, you are ahead of the curve because that's exactly where we're headed. Any other thoughts in the audience? Thanks, Caroline and Mark, for your thoughts on that.
Yeah, anyone else have examples of negative gossip or what they see as negative effects of gossip?
Oh, you got one, Caroline. Go ahead.
Okay. Don, my colleague at UC Santa Barbara, says, I see folks using gossip to bolster a work friend. You should have gotten that promotion. I heard that the person who got it had done awful things and evil things. So, the thought is, well, I'm trying to help my friend, but in essence, what happens is then it's a put down for the person who actually got the job. Yeah.
Yep, good one, Don. That's where one can be seemingly positive, right? But not so much. Mark?
Yeah, I was just going to kind of reiterate that, again, another example Don shared of it's not necessarily motivated out of malice and desire to destroy somebody. It's not necessarily black and white in all cases. What constitutes gossip, kind of like what Daniela was pointing out, that there are motivations that change how it lands.
Yeah, and I'll add, we see a lot of this sort of type of thing in the ombuds office with people who come in and are convinced that they're in the right and someone else is in the wrong. And part of it is they've been bolstered by their, companion, their friends, their other people in the workplace who are just trying to make them feel better, might not be telling them the truth. But then the result is, that it can make people think that something really wrong is going on when it might not be.
Excellent. Thank you for that. All right. Okay, well, let's go on. I'm just going to go ahead and take a look at some of the negative consequences. I pulled these from some of the blog posts and ombuds, and just to give you an idea of some. I think we've touched on most of them already, but we'll just read through them and then we'll move on to some of the more positive hidden virtues. So, as you've all touched on and through some of your examples, negative gossip can erode trust and morale. I'm looking over here. If you see me looking over here, it's from looking at my other screen. I can't read, this screen is too small. Lost productivity, wasted time, increased anxiety among employees, so it can really impact people's mental health. Divisiveness among employees, as people feel like they have to pick sides or be like allies in some form or fashion. Hurt feelings, reputations get damaged, and attrition. People leave, right? People get fed up and leave if it can get bad enough. So those are just some that we talked about in Ombuds. So feel free to take a look at that when you have a chance. Okay, moving on. So here in our hidden virtues, I'll read this quote for those who might not see it. Our globe discovers its hidden virtues not only in heroes and archangels, but in gossip. So let's explore that a little bit. What's going on here? I mean, the converse reality is that gossip is not always bad. And Daniela and others, I think, are already kind of tapping into this. It could be positive or neutral, and play an important role and be useful, right? In staying connected and sharing information that maybe can help maintain social order, and I'd love to hear some of the ombuds examples, serve as an organizational warning sign, right? And sharing communication and knowledge about underlying issues that the organization might not be aware of, if they can be verified, of course, and helpful in some way. So Caroline, Mark, what are your thoughts? And others too, please chime in the chat.
Well, just kind of following up on what Daniela said about relieving pressure and tension. I think we're seeing in workplaces, around the country with staffing shortages, that people are under a lot of stress, that the workplaces are demanding in a way that they've never been before. The workplaces are more diverse than ever before, which has, great advantages, but also makes, communication a little more complicated. There's more complex factors. There's just different types of communication styles and cultures. And so just having some way to kind of talk about things in a funny way, just tell stories. It's, it's part of our humanity and connecting with people, but I'll just leave it at that.
No, that's great. Thank you. Mark?
I kind of think in some ways of gossip as just a tool, maybe not an intentional tool, but a tool in an organizational culture. How do people deal with conflict? And the ways are going to be many and varied, from formal to informal. And gossip is one that obviously is part of how cultures build up within an organization. And I ask this question sometimes, you have a conflict culture within your organization. Is it the one you want? And recognizing that gossip is going to potentially play a role. How do you mitigate against the toxic stuff that Daniela was talking about? And so I try to look at it that way and share very briefly another very generalized example. Another department had a member of the department who's experienced some significant mental health challenges, kind of exacerbated, and in some ways, folks talking about it at least got that information out in a way that was able to get help for that individual. And maybe that's not the channel you would want in ideal circumstances, but it was a communications channel. So that's kind of one way that I look at it.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing that. I'm not seeing a lot in the chat. Anyone else have their own examples they want to share of where they've seen positive gossip, good gossip? Maybe they've uncovered a hidden virtue in gossip. Oh, Scott's got something. So Scott says, sounds like gossiping is potentially good because other situations are worse. I'd like to think there are better alternatives available. Okay, fair. Caroline, Mark, anything you want to share that might put Scott's mind at ease, that maybe it's not as bad as maybe it sounds?
I mean, I think one thing that comes up for me in Scott's comment is that some people are really introverted and it's really hard for them to bring something up in a meeting. And that this might be a sign that, we really need to do better at teaching people productive ways to be assertive and, productive ways to have communications. I think, Liz, you all have crucial conversations trainings at UC Boulder. I think that's a great one.
Yeah, we do. Yes. I'll give a shout out. Yeah. Our organizational employee development folks, if you haven't already, they offer it regularly for all campus constituents. So you can go to their website and check that out. But yes, I mean, there are, different ways to communicate for sure. I think the point here is that gossip can help uncover things that might not otherwise surface, and also that connectivity that we've been talking about, can help people build connections with each other. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the things. I have another list here, right? Some of the things I pulled from a post that I published in August, and then we'll move on to our scenario. So, here we talk about, again, we talked about the entertainment, it definitely serves its entertainment value to release tension, as Gabriella was talking about. It can be used to help influence others. And I guess that could go either way, but it can be a positive influence. Exchange important information, and that would be positive information. Learning how to behave socially, right? What are the expectations in our social groups and our workplace norms? Learning from others' mistakes, we can learn a lot from how people evaluate, others' behaviors and whatnot, and learn from those mistakes. Establish and develop relationships, create group bonds, define social status, manage reputations, and resolve conflicts. We can gossip can uncover a lot of information, and we can use that information to help people move forward. Teresa, one of her blog posts about gossip, gave an example of exactly that, and I won't get into it too much here, but talked about how she was able to use gossip she was hearing from her group to then help kind of bring the manager into the know, with permission, of course, and help that group work through some of its misunderstandings and misinformation to create a healthier working environment. So that was really a great example. Okay.
I'll add, sorry, before you move on, quickly, for those who can't read the chat, Don Lubach offers a story of a leader who would tell her education instructors good rumors about their teaching. So things that weren't official, official records, but stories of them as hero.
Nice. Thanks for sharing that, Don. Yeah, so before we move on to our scenario, just to kind of wrap up the hidden, gossip can really help individuals, right? To understand the world around them so they can make adjustments. We kind of learn from that. It can also, bring us attention to us of imminent dangers, provide information that we can use. And like I said earlier, to maybe to surface underlying organizational problems that might not otherwise surface. So let's look at this. Caroline, I'm gonna defer to you here to read through our next scenario. And before I turn to it, I just want people to keep in mind, we've been talking about the good and the bad. And I think it's also important to note that they're not always separate discourses, right? The paradox of gossip that we're really honing in on is that it can be both potentially hazardous and potentially helpful. So Caroline, do you want to walk us through this scenario?
Absolutely. So Supervisor Quinn, who does identify as female, hired another woman in the department as her new team member. Rumor has it that she also happens to be Quinn's happy hour buddy. Others believe that there were equally qualified candidates in the candidate pool. One of the candidates allegedly filed a discrimination complaint with the Office of Equity and Compliance. Meanwhile, team members are saying things like, Quinn is sexist. How does the organization address nepotism? Morale and productivity is tanking. Quinn is seemingly oblivious.
Yeah. So I don't know, Mark, what do you make of this? Good gossip, bad gossip? What do you think?
It's tricky because there are so many people involved, and not just within the office. There's an Office of equity and compliance that is potentially involved, and that process has to be able to work. But there's an information vacuum that people are going to want to fill in, and how do you help people do that is tough when there's going to be limits on what can be shared. But there's also opportunity here for perhaps intervention for the sake of Quinn and effectiveness as a supervisor, not making judgments that Quinn actually is sexist or has made terrible mistakes in hiring this new department member. But how is Quinn going to move forward effectively, considering what's just happened?
Yeah, it's a sticky situation for Quinn. If it's brought to her attention, I think, I mean, in a way, it might be raising issues that there was already a problem with Quinn. If Quinn was a super stellar manager, it would be a harder atmosphere for these type of complaints to kind of come to fruition. Is the morale and productivity, is that because of this hire, or was that something that sort of predated it? It's good to hear that, possibly people are using their channels, their appropriate channels, like the Office of Equity and Compliance. On the other hand, when a complaint like that is filed, it often means there's sort of a hiatus on sharing information. So, it makes it more difficult for, if somebody questions Quinn, she might not be able to talk about it. And do we even know that the complaint was filed, or is it a rumor, or did somebody try to file a complaint? And I know, what sometimes happens with people who come to our office is, well, they tried to file a complaint and then they found out there actually was nothing that was against policy that was done.
Yeah, I think for those on the call who are ombuds or organizations who have ombuds, and this is where I think really is powerful to have help of an ombuds, because within the organization, we are going to be impartial as to who's right or wrong, but can find opportunities to engage with leaders to say, there's a challenge that's facing the organization, and you have to let the formal process grow. But as Carolyn noted, it may be broader than simply the incident or the actions that are the part of a formal process. There's going to be an undercurrent of probably discontent or conflict that's already existing that may be helpful for having help addressing. And that's where we strive as ombuds to help find effective ways to move forward without judgment.
Well, those are all really good points. How about our audience? Anything come up for you? Any thoughts you want to share? Feel free to put them in the chat. And while you're doing that, and I'll, in Caroline and Mark, I'll come back to you. Any final comments on this? I think the point here too, and one of the messages, right, is that it's not always black or white. It's not very always clear cut. And I'll give a shameless plug. I mean, ombuds can really be a great resource to help kind of sort that out. And are you exploring all the options, and what are the things that you can do? And that's also a great teaser for our December program, which we'll be talking about what are things you can do when you're hearing harmful gossip, or what you perceive to be harmful gossip. What are some things you can do to mitigate that? And then even more importantly, what do you do when it's about you, right? What do you do when you find out the gossip is about you? What are some steps you can take? So that'll be in December. So keep your eye out for that. Anyone have thoughts for the chat? I don't see anything coming in. Mark, Caroline, any other thoughts on this one? Or just in general about gossip, good, bad, or indifferent?
Well, I skipped over Mark's comment in the chat. I'm sorry about that, about developing skills, and how, it really is important for us all to develop skills to communicate better in the workplace. I see another comment just came in from Laura Myers Wagner. The unit should have established recruiting, hiring process, and once the decision is made, there should be transparency about the decision and how the risks of friends relationships will be managed effectively to avoid concerns of favoritism. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that too, Laura's comment. And in some ways, for me at least, it kind of highlights my feeling like gossip is going to happen, and it's in some level is going to be part of your organizational conflict culture. Can you develop tools like a policy that Laura's talking about that helps establish other channels for communication? Because people will fill in the void regardless. How do we help provide productive ways for people to do that?
Yeah, that's a great point. Looks like Daniela. I think Scott had a comment and Daniela's chiming in as well. Scott feels like maybe he's a little bit more cynical about this. He definitely sees gossip as wrong and bad. If one can turn things positive because of gossip, then that's a different story. Okay, so thanks for acknowledging that. Potential for opportunity to fix things because of gossip. Yeah, so that is what we have identified as one of the hidden virtues. How about Daniela? Mark, Caroline, you want to take a look at Daniela's?
I'll read it for those who can't see the chat. Gossip can be a helpful way to maintain unity and hash out disagreements behind the scenes so that people can remain harmonious outwardly. And she notes that this is kind of looking in response to what Scott had noted.
Mm-hmm.
We certainly don't want to encourage people to talk behind others' backs as a conflict management tool. But there are ways that you can build from it, which is kind of what Scott, I think, was noting as well. You know, you want to try to pivot towards a positive outcome when you can. And, you know, I think, again, as a tool with an organization that has an ombuds, you know, so I've seen other organizations sometimes want to bring in a coach or bring in an external consultant to deal with it, and which can be great. But I would also note that an ombuds is going to continue to be there within the organization to kind of navigate through the after effects of something that happens like this.
Yeah, thank you. So I am noticing the time. We're a little over 12:30. So for those who need to hop off, you know, feel free. Thanks so much for being here. And we can continue the conversation. I know, Caroline, you need to hop off as well. I'm happy to stay on and continue the chat, and we can take the videos. We can turn your videos on and all that. But first, I'll just share this. This is if you do want to contact our office, this is how you can reach us, where you can find our blog. And of course, you can follow us on Twitter. And so with that, I'll go ahead and stop the recording if I can get my Zoom bar to come back. And we can have maybe people who maybe haven't asked questions will feel more comfortable. We can turn our videos on. Mark, I don't know, are you available to stick around for a few minutes if people want to keep talking?